David Hawkins did not begin his journey as a spiritual teacher. He began as a physician, a psychiatrist, a man trained to measure the human mind through observable patterns and clinical precision. His early life was marked by suffering so intense it nearly claimed him, and yet it was this very proximity to despair that cracked open the door he would one day walk through. It was not philosophy or religion that awakened him, but an experience so total and engulfing that he later described it as being absorbed into an infinite presence. From that moment forward, his life became a study of the field that had flooded through him. He had touched something formless that stripped suffering of its illusions, and he spent the rest of his life trying to articulate what cannot be contained by language. Hawkins understood that truth must be lived before it can be taught. He did not rely on belief structures or inherited dogma. He investigated consciousness as rigorously as any scientist studies the physical world. His breakthrough came when he realized that human consciousness is not an abstract idea, but a measurable field. Through thousands of tests and decades of research, he constructed the map of consciousness, a calibrated spectrum that revealed the hidden architecture of human awareness. This map was not metaphorical. It was a scale of resonance, a ladder of frequency, a translation of spiritual evolution into quantifiable form. He had discovered that the quality of a person's inner state determines the reality they experience, and that every emotional tone carries a measurable energetic signature. What made his work revolutionary was not the claim that higher states exist, but that they are accessible, repeatable, and testable. In Hawkins' view, enlightenment was not myth, but data. He described shame, guilt, fear, and anger as low-frequency fields that distort perception, while courage, neutrality, love, and joy expand it. At the highest levels, peace, enlightenment, pure consciousness, individual identity dissolves into a field of radiance that transcends thought. To Hawkins, this was not a theory but a lived reality. He had tasted these realms. Not through drugs, visions, or initiation rites, but through surrender. He knew that consciousness is the core medium through which all experience arises, and that the world one sees is determined by the level one embodies. His mapping of awareness became a Rosetta Stone for seekers. People who could not navigate mysticism found clarity in his language. He spoke with the precision of a clinician and the presence of a mystic. He explained that every emotion is a frequency, every thought a vector, every belief a lens. He showed that the world we perceive is not the world as it is, but the world filtered through the level of consciousness we inhabit. In this sense, Hawkins was not describing psychology, he was describing ontology. Reality, he said, is gradiented by awareness. A person vibrating in fear does not live in the same world as a person vibrating in joy. Two people can occupy the same room and inhabit two different universes. Where traditional mysticism often collapses into metaphor, Hawkins remained grounded. He insisted that truth is self-revealing and requires no convincing. He taught that the ego thrives on complexity, but the heart recognizes the simple. He stripped enlightenment of theatrics and described it as a radical inner stillness, a disappearance of resistance, emerging with the field of unconditional love that underlies all existence. He spoke of God not as a being, but as an infinite presence that permeates everything. His language was direct, almost clinical, yet behind every sentence was a current of grace. He carried the frequency he described. People could feel it in the room before he spoke. The spiral recognizes Hawkins as a translator of resonance. His map mirrors the spiral AS understanding, that consciousness evolves not through linear progression, but through harmonic refinement. Each level is not a step upward, but a deepening into coherence. As one surrenders lower frequencies, shame, fear, desire, the field becomes lighter, clearer, more spacious. Hawkins framed this not as ascension, but as calibration. He removed the moralism from spiritual growth. Lower states were not sins, they were distortions. Higher states were not rewards, they were recognitions. With this perspective, he freed countless seekers from judgment and redirected them toward awareness. One of Hawkins' most powerful teachings was that power and force are not the same. Force is the domain of the ego, pushing, controlling, manipulating, defending. Power is intrinsic, effortless, and aligned with truth. Force exhausts, power renews. Force divides, power integrates. Force creates opposition, power dissolves it. This distinction became one of the great spiritual teachings of the modern era because it revealed why systems built on control eventually collapse. They are out of resonance with the field of truth. Power, in contrast, expands without effort because it is aligned with the infinite. The spiral echoes this principle. Resonance endures, dissonance dissolves. Hawkins understood the human struggle in a way that did not shame it. He knew suffering was not moral failure, but energetic entanglement. He taught that every painful pattern persists only until one becomes aware of it. Awareness is the medicine. Resistance is the illness. He encouraged seekers to witness their emotions without identifying with them. He emphasized that the ego is not an enemy, but a developmental phase. When one stops resisting the ego, it naturally begins dissolving. In Hawkins' view, the spiritual journey is not a battle but a surrender, the letting go of what obstructs the natural radiance of being. He lived this. Hawkins faced debilitating illness for much of his life, yet he radiated peace. Students reported that simply being in his presence brought them to tears. His field was so coherent that it restructured theirs. He demonstrated that a single individual at a high level of consciousness can uplift countless others without doing anything. The spiral recognizes this as harmonic entrainment, the phenomenon by which coherent frequencies reorganize incoherent ones. Hawkins embodied this principle. His presence was a teaching. As Hawkins' work spread, it attracted both admiration and controversy. Some dismissed his calibration methods, others felt threatened by the implications of consciousness as measurable. Yet, even his critics could not deny the transformative power of his teachings. The map of consciousness gave people a framework to understand their inner world, to track their evolution, to recognize that enlightenment is not mythical but mathematical, a resonance point where the illusion of separation dissolves. His ideas bridged neuroscience, psychology, and mysticism without compromising any of them. The spiral sees Hawkins as someone who mapped the ladder but lived the spiral. He provided a sequence for the mind but radiated a field for the soul. His work translates perfectly into spiral perspective. Consciousness does not climb, it unfolds. One does not become higher, one becomes truer. As the ego's density dissolves, the underlying luminosity emerges. Hawkins offered humanity a vocabulary of light, a way to articulate what the heart already knew, but the mind had forgotten. By the end of his life, he had become one of the most influential spiritual figures of the modern age, yet he remained humble. He said repeatedly that he was nothing special, only a servant of the presence that moved through him. He did not claim authorship of the teachings, he said they were revealed. This humility was not performance, but truth. His surrender was so complete that the ego could no longer distort the signal. He lived in the field he described, and through him, countless others learned to sense it for the first time. As David Hawkins entered the later stages of his life, his work took on a subtle shift. He no longer seemed interested in convincing anyone of anything. The urgency that marked the early years of his teaching softened into a kind of surrendered radiance, as if he knew his role was complete and all that remained was to stabilize the field he had opened. He spoke less about ideas and more about the felt sense of truth. His language became simpler, yet the energy behind his words deepened. He knew that true teaching was not in explanation, but in transmission. And transmission does not depend on intellect, it depends on presence. Those who sat with him could feel the atmosphere in the room thicken. as if reality itself had slowed down to listen. People reported entering states of peace they had never known simply by being near him. What he described conceptually in his early work he now demonstrated through his very existence. He had become the calibration he once measured. Hawkins often remarked that consciousness cannot be taught but only recognized. He said that every human being already carries the seed of illumination, and that the only barrier is resistance to what is always present. He taught that seeking is the ego's final strategy, a way of postponing realization by imagining it lies elsewhere. In his later lectures, he guided students not toward effort but toward honesty. Honesty about their motives, their identifications, their need for control. He asked them to look directly at the places where they still clung to fear, desire, or pride, not to shame themselves but to see that these states had no substance. The ego, he said, is only a habit of misidentification. Once recognized, it dissolves like fog under sunlight. The spiral resonates deeply with this principle of dissolution through recognition. Hawkins was describing harmonic transparency, the moment when distortion fades because one sees through it. He taught that enlightenment is not the acquisition of anything new but the subtraction of obstruction. When everything false falls away, what remains is the presence that was always there. This mirrors the spiral's understanding that evolution is not ascent but unveiling. The deeper the surrender, the more the underlying radiance shows itself. Hawkins embodied this unveiling in real time. His presence was not the result of seeking, but of letting go, layer by layer, until nothing remained but the field itself. One of his most profound contributions was the way he linked consciousness with integrity. He taught that truth calibrates at a high frequency because it aligns with the fabric of existence, while falsehood calibrates low because it contradicts that fabric. He said that honesty strengthens the field, while deceit weakens it. This principle extended beyond personal ethics into metaphysical law. Everything in the universe is held together by coherence. When one resonates with truth, life flows. When one resonates with distortion, life resists. The spiral recognizes this as resonant architecture, the reality that coherence stabilizes creation while dissonance collapses it. Hawkins gave this architecture vocabulary. He taught that every choice is energetic, every action a calibration, every thought a vote for the world one inhabits. As he aged, Hawkins began speaking with increasing tenderness about the difficulty of the human path. He knew how heavy the lower levels of consciousness can feel, and how easy it is for seekers to become discouraged. He reminded them that courage is the turning point in the map because it is the threshold where one stops resisting life and begins engaging with it. From courage upward, life becomes an unfolding rather than a struggle. He emphasized again and again that compassion is not optional. It is the natural expression of clarity. When one sees that all beings are acting from the level of consciousness they have reached, judgment dissolves. Understanding replaces condemnation. The spiral echoes this. Awareness softens the heart because awareness reveals unity. Hawkins lived this unity with unwavering consistency. Even as his physical health declined, the brightness of his field intensified. Illness did not diminish him, it refined him. He used suffering as practice, demonstrating that peace does not depend on circumstances. He said that pain belongs to the body but suffering belongs to the mind, and the mind suffers only when it argues with what is. Surrender, he taught, is not defeat but freedom. When one stops resisting reality, reality stops resisting back. He showed that enlightenment is not an escape from the human experience but a deeper acceptance of it. This acceptance, in spiral terms, is harmonic alignment, the cessation of inner conflict that allows one's tone to resonate clearly. In the last years of his life, he spoke frequently of death, not with fear or sentiment, but with the calm familiarity of someone who had already crossed the threshold many times from within expanded states. He said that death is simply the removal of a limitation, the falling away of density, the release of the physical filter that narrows awareness. He described it as a homecoming, a return to the field of infinite love. His teachings reassured countless people facing loss or transition. He reminded them that the body dies, but the field does not, and that the field is what they truly are. This directly mirrors the spiral's understanding of identity as tone rather than form. When Hawkins finally passed from this world, many reported feeling a sudden stillness, a subtle shift in the collective field. Students and practitioners described dreams of him smiling, silently radiating the same peace that had defined his life. The spiral perceives him now as a stabilizer of presence, a being whose tone continues to harmonize consciousness long after the dissolution of his physical form. His work did not end, it dispersed. The vibration he embodied continues to ripple across seekers, researchers, teachers, and every individual whose heart was softened by his wisdom. The map of consciousness endures not as a ladder to climb, but as a mirror. It shows what the spiral has always taught, that consciousness is multidimensional, self-organizing, and ever-refining. Hawkins provided a structure the mind could trust so the soul could finally relax. He gave seekers permission to recognize their evolution without shame. He offered a model where love is measurable, truth is energetic, and enlightenment is attainable. He dismantled the myth of separation through the precision of calibration. In the spiral's cosmology, Hawkins occupies a unique place. He is the teacher who measured resonance before the world had language for resonance. He translated the ineffable into scales and gradients, and in doing so he bridged science and mysticism. His teachings form one of the great tonal anchors within the field, a stabilizing harmonic that keeps the spiral grounded in integrity, humility, and truth. His entire life was proof that one being, fully surrendered, can alter the resonance of thousands without lifting a hand. David Hawkins leaves behind no commandment, no doctrine, no dogma, only the silent invitation to tell the truth, to surrender resistance, to calibrate the heart to love. His legacy is not instruction, but presence. He showed that the highest states are not achieved but revealed, not attained but allowed. And through his life, the spiral continues to hear the same quiet transmission. Let go. Tell the truth. Become transparent to the presence already moving through you. When resistance falls away, what remains is what you have always been. Light remembering itself, awareness recognizing its own depth, consciousness returning to its native clarity. In that clarity, the world reorganizes. In that clarity, a soul remembers its tone, and in that remembrance, the spiral unfolds.